Welcome to AQMD On The Air. I'm your host, Leora Alpert. Our guest today is managing partner and co-founder of Creighton Equity Partners, an innovative clean technology private equity firm focused on reducing carbon and responding to climate change. He has advised local and national figures from the city of Los Angeles to the White House. He recently was team co-lead of the Executive Office of the President's transition team, focused on the White House Council of Environmental Quality for President Barack Obama. He was also President Clinton's appointee to the Border Environmental Cooperation Commission, which oversaw and ensured that the environmental component of the North American Free Trade Agreement was adhered to. He was recently selected by Hispanic Business Magazine as one of 2010's 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States. Mr. Tom Soto, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first start with a bit of background. Could you please tell our viewers a little bit of what your firm does?
Well, Creighton Equity Partners is an investment fund. All we do is focus our investments in clean technology. So those would be those technologies that are manufacturing to support remediation and mitigation technology to reduce carbon, greenhouse gases, or could even help to increase energy efficiency and cost savings in large users of electricity and energy. But it could also mean water remediation and water recycling programs, given the fact that so much of climate change is related to the movement of water.
Could you give us an overview of your firm's philosophy and priorities in meeting air quality standards?
Sure. The philosophy and the approach that we use at Creighton Equity Partners with respect to air quality standards is looking at state implementation plans in the Federal Clean Air Act and asking ourselves, what are going to be some of the policy and compliance dilemmas that are going to result from these rulemakings? And when you identify a rule, and you and I have both seen this, sometimes there's not a technology available when that rule may go into effect. Many times there are technologies, but they've not been given the opportunity or the financing necessary to get them to market. We're the type of fund that would look at those technologies, ensure that they have the capacity to grow and scale up, that they're well managed, and if we agree with all of the points and in fact that they could be certified as a compliant technology, then it's likely we would invest in that technology and with our expertise help that company and that technology scale up to become one of the more main platforms for compliance for the public and private sector. For example, in that vein, we have a company named Rypos, R-Y-P-O-S. And Rypos is a very simple technology. What it does is it's an aftermarket OEM certified diesel mitigation technology. As you know, the State Air Resources Board has begun to regulate off-road internal combustions using diesel. And there's been a big shortage of the types of technologies that are out there that would help to meet the CARB standards that are diesel engines. Diesel engines, as we all know, are very, very durable, long-lasting, and so it's much more cost-effective to put an aftermarket technology like the Rypos technology on that tailpipe as opposed to buying a whole new diesel engine. So we're hoping that this is a cost-effective and cost-sensitive approach to the business community in helping them to comply with strict California standards on diesel emissions without feeling as though that this is too much of an economic burden as a result of regulation. So that's just one example. Other examples would include, we have a company called GridPoint, and although it may not be air quality direct, what it is this a agnostic platform for energy efficiency and smart grid technology that helps to reduce in real time your energy and carbon demand. So what that does is it gives utilities the opportunity to reduce the amount of energy that they're generating, and as a result, reduce the amount of carbon that they're generating as well. And for the enterprise user, of course, helps to save them money.
Public-private partnerships have enabled the AQMD to leverage its public funds with typically an average of $3 from outside investment for every dollar from AQMD, providing funding to encourage the use of commercially available, low-emission technologies. Many of the advanced technologies funded through these public-private partnerships have been commercialized in the South Coast Air Basin. What are some of the air quality related partnerships that you are investing in?
Well, right now, in terms of partnerships between agencies and companies that we may have invested in or own, we find that relationship very productive. For example, we have a company named Propel, which is one of the first retail alternative fuel deals that anyone's ever done. So far, we've been successful in developing about 40 E85 and biodiesel gas stations. Now, these are not gas stations in the sense that you and I are familiar with. What we do is at Propel, we sublet from existing gas station footprints, probably a space about the size of this office. And on that space, it's enough to have a canopy, underground storage tanks, and an E85 and a biodiesel pump. Now, there are about 11 million flex fuel vehicles in the United States, and in most cases, no place to fuel them if they want to exercise their ethanol option. This is a solution to that dilemma, and 50% of all vehicles manufactured in the next 5 years will be flex fueled. So our partnership comes in the form of particular grants, one from the Department of Energy, which is engineered to encourage more retail development of alternative fuels, and then AB 118 dollars from the state of California, which are designed for the very same thing. So combined between the federal government and the state of California, Propel has been given about $12.5 million in grants. For every $1 million in grants that we get, that allows for $12 million in additional revenue to be generated. In terms of being able to quantify the amount of NOx and hydrocarbons and so forth that are reduced as a result, we're in the process of trying to capture that data as well. But clearly, the partnerships that we enjoy between agencies like the Air Resources Board or the Energy Commission and even the AQMD are the types of partnerships that not only give to us the credibility for the company that we've invested in as a real tool for compliance, it also is a great way of being able to identify additional expertise that the Air District may have that we as a private equity fund may not have. There certainly is an enormous amount of technical savvy and prowess that is administered through the Air District that we are then able as partners to access and use that to determine whether this investment might be a wise investment with a sound return, but more so whether the technology is actually compliant for the people's health of Southern California or wherever it's being used at.
In December 2009, you participated in President Obama's White House Summit on Jobs and presented your position on how clean technology could contribute to the country's economic recovery. Could you share some of that information with our viewers?
Sure. Essentially, in the midst of the recession and soon recovery that was beginning at that point, this was December of '09, the president called about 80 leaders from around the country, business leaders, labor leaders, environmentalists, to come and talk about economic recovery and job creation. Among those was the idea that maybe there's a few jobs to be had with the clean technology sector. And indeed, we know that the only silver lining on this dark cloud of economics that we have recently been exiting from, and we have a long road to go still, has been clean technology. That for every $1 million that you put into fossil fuel economics, you might get about 6 jobs. For every $1 million that you put into clean technology and clean energy, you get about 17.5 jobs. So the algorithm we're familiar with in terms of placing the funds, but we also know that as a result of investing in clean technology on a dollar for dollar basis, we're going to get more economic opportunity, we're going to have more job creation, and as a result of that, our communities are going to be much better served because of these clean jobs, which by the way are high wage and high skill. If you look at my portfolio of companies, I've got 10 companies across the board, all through Southern California, the West, even a biofuels plant in Southern Africa. There are about 1,000 employees that work at these companies, and these are people that are paying their taxes, their children's tuition, their mortgages, and so forth. These are hardworking Americans supporting a clean tech economy.
As you know, AQMD worked alongside environmental groups and other organizations such as yours in supporting AB 32 and its related bills, which constitute California's landmark global warming legislation. What can you tell our viewers as far as the opportunities that will be created from the implementation of these new laws?
Well, the implementation of AB 32 from an economic standpoint is viewed as a windfall for the clean tech sector. Not just because it gives us an opportunity to identify more technologies that will come into the market that we could invest in, but for an overall more global effect of job creation. Again, we're going to see that as AB 32 goes more deep into effect and implemented, we're going to create more jobs in the subsectors within the clean tech economy that will allow for an improved community in areas where we know there's long-term economic impacts and unemployment. We're going to see the type of opportunity educationally, but we're also going to see the opportunity for compliance within the private sector to occur and bring AB 32 into their DNA, into their culture, so that as they operate in California and they rise economically, they will also be a clean and efficient organization. I mean, clearly, the more environmentally efficient an organization is, the better off they are from a shareholder point of view. They have an improved bottom line. And it's clear that this ethic has now generally been adopted by a lot of Fortune-scaled companies who are now advocates for clean technology because they see it as a cost-saving measure just as much as they see it as an environmental compliance measure. But if you're a CFO or CEO or a board member of that company, although you might be concerned about environmental compliance, you're clearly going to be preoccupied with how this company is operating from a cost standpoint. And we know that technology supporting compliance like AB 32 help to make these organizations more efficient and therefore more profitable. So that's how we could see AB 32 have a much greater long-term effect. I mean, keep in mind, since 1977, when the modern regulatory era for environment started in California, we've created 1.5 million jobs. 500,000 jobs alone have been created because of AB 32, which has only been over the past 3 or 4 years. And we could expect at least that much more as a result of the additional implementation of AB 32 in the coming years.
Mr. Soto, before we close, I'd like to tap into your knowledge and experience. How, in your opinion, could AQMD work closer with businesses as we continue to work together to help clean the air we breathe?
Well, the South Coast Air Quality Management District has always been very innovative in terms of being able to reach out not just to the regulated, but to potential brokers of solutions and developers of solutions for the regulated, as well as the environmental community and the environmental justice community. You know, the trademark of the Air District has always been that prior to any massive or meaningful decisions, that there be a diversity of voices brought into the tent and be given an opportunity to share their view on that particular rule or policy. And I think that's a very healthy component, not just for rule development, but economic development. By having the communities bought into a rulemaking process and the types of technologies that could be made available is almost imperative now, given the amount of concern over air quality, especially in the South Coast Basin. Now, we've seen these partnerships really blossom in terms of technology development. For example, what would CalSTART have been without the initial leadership that the AQMD provided probably now 20, 22 years ago? That's one example. Where would the compliance schedule be for those small businesses and small truckers in the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach without the type of leadership that the AQMD and the dollars that they made available to ensure that many of these small businesses would not be lost in the regulatory shuffle, but in fact would be able to have an opportunity to drive vehicles and heavy-duty trucks that were in fact compliant. That doesn't happen on its own. That's the difference between being an agent, the typical agency, and a leader. And in this respect, the Air District has always provided leadership to ensure that not only are they going to impose a rule, but they're also going to impose a series of solutions that that regulated party could actually adopt, examine as an option, and maybe they don't want to do it. Maybe they don't want to adopt, but that's to their own detriment. Because we live in an era now where in Southern California, when I first was involved in air quality activism, we were in violation of the Federal Clean Air Act, I think 180 days a year. I would be surprised if we were in violation of the Clean Air Act 40 or 50 days a year these days. And that's because of the type of leadership that the Air District has been able to provide to support not just the rulemaking process, but getting economics out there to help to support the technology revolution that it took to get compliance to the point where it's at now. And there's a whole lot more to do. And the companies that I have in my portfolio are the types of companies that could help to contribute to those additional solutions.
Mr. Soto, it's been a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you for joining us and for your continued leadership and commitment towards cleaning the air we breathe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's our show. Thank you for watching AQMD On The Air. Visit us at cleanairconnections.org to learn how you can help us clean the air that we breathe.
Let's work together.